This is Joey. Joey has Down syndrome. He's also autistic. Joey was adopted by my wife and I. In no way am I a hero or a great person.
How many kids do you have?
That seems like such an easy question, but it's actually a tough question for me to answer.
This is your child, and of course you have hopes, but you need to make a choice.
There was the three of us in the room with my daughter, and basically you take her off life support. It's the toughest decision I think a parent ever has to make. My wife and I have made that decision actually twice. Every day we had to give injections to my daughter. Every time we did this, she would stand up and kiss you. Well, you know, it was like just unconditional love.
Hey guys, welcome to Soul to Soul. My guest today is my friend Alan. This is the interview I wanted actually to do for a while, even he doesn't know that. He has a very profound story that I want to share with you. He lost two of his daughters and he adopted a son with special needs. We're going to talk about what it is, why he decided to make that choice, and what brought him here in Bali. Alan, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me here. I've been waiting to do this for quite a while, so.
Yeah.
And this is Joey.
Hey, Joey. How are you doing, buddy?
How you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're okay?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Joey, as you can see, has special needs. Well, maybe you can see, maybe you can't. Sometimes parents don't even see, anybody that's got exceptionalities is just the same as anybody else. So, but Joey does have some exceptionalities, right? You're a special boy, right?
Right.
You're a good boy, right?
Right.
Yeah. Good. So we're going to do an interview. You want to go watch your iPad?
Yeah.
Okay. See you later. Okay, bud?
Hello. All right.
Oh,
Good.
hello. Hello.
Love you too, bud.
How about that?
Can you tell me and people who are watching how it is to live with a child with special needs? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the good things?
There's lots of good things, like living with a child with special needs. You learn so much about life and about yourself. You learn about things that are important that maybe before, you didn't think were so important. The challenges, you got to learn a lot about yourself too. Like one of the things I have had to learn a lot about in the last year is having patience, having the patience to deal with him, because he doesn't always do the things you want him to do. He's got his own mind of what he wants to do. Joey has Down syndrome. He's also autistic, so he likes things to be so-so. Everything's got to be, like in a routine. And if you change that, then, he can get upset, and you need to appreciate that and understand it. Definitely, I think one of the things you have to have patience, but you need to really try to understand how he sees things, because he sees things in a different way than I do or you do. And this has been a key learning for me over the years, is just learning about children or even adults with special needs, that they call them exceptionalities because they really are exceptional in a lot of ways, and they teach you so much about life.
How does your day-to-day life look like compared to somebody who have kids or don't have kids?
I'm retired now for the last couple of years, so my schedule totally revolves around Joey. It's what's on his agenda for the day. Like his morning routine, to get out of bed. He wears diapers still. He's got some other health issues, so get him out of bed, get him in the bathtub, get him washed. Like he can't do any of that himself, so he's totally dependent on me. So my morning routine with him is like, it's a 90-minute routine, time to get him bath, dress, have breakfast, and then do something, but our whole schedule revolves around him, essentially.
Yeah. How old is he?
Joey's 24, he'll be 25 in November.
And this routine will continue for the rest of his life, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess as a parent, for me, sometimes being in routine with kids and doing the same things is very hard. But I know at some point they will grow up and hopefully go and live their own life, and maybe even move out the apartment so I can have my peace time in the morning.
Yeah,
For you, that's not the case.
No, I mean, and that's okay for me. Like, I accept that, I was the same opinion, when we first started having kids, that they're going to grow up, they're going to go to school, they're going to get married, they're going to move away and have their own kids. And that's just the way life progresses. But I soon found out that that's not always the case, how it progresses. So, and having Joey, like he takes a lot of care and attention. Some ways he's independent, but not a lot of ways. So, so to me, it's a lifetime commitment to him to look after him.
Beautiful. The one thing that we talked about that is challenging was you were talking about meltdowns. So something happened. Can you describe that?
Joey had these issues. We call them meltdowns. They're very common for not just kids with Downs, but other kids that have, some kind of disability or, ADHD or other things where something happens in their brain. A switch goes off and they melt down. Joey had experienced these quite a few times, and he actually gets quite violent. And the only thing, like, he'll start hitting me or whoever's with him, and then the only thing you can do is try to wrestle him to the ground and hold him down, and because he'll also start hitting himself, or banging his head on the ground. So when it happens, hopefully there's other people around, because you throw blankets around him, wrap him up, hold him, and put pillows around him so he doesn't hurt himself. But those episodes can last like an hour and a half. At the end of it, like when the last one was over a year ago that I had with Joey, and I was soaking wet just from sweat because he's very, very strong. It's like he has a superhuman strength, and you can't reach him to talk to him, but as fast as it can come on, it snaps and it goes off. It's like a switch in the brain. So those were very common things that we've been experienced with him for a number of years. And he was on some medication to try to help manage that, like an antipsychotic medication. I don't know that it really works. In the last year, I've learned a lot about managing him and understanding him and connecting with him, like how to connect to him and look for signs now. Like always, when these things happen, you go, what triggered that? What set it off? And you try to look for those signs to say, okay, don't do that again. And what I've learned is when he gets to that, just leave him, walk away and say, okay, that's fine. And sometimes he'll come out of it by himself, and sometimes he won't. So it just depends. But, fortunately for the last year, it's been really good. And we haven't had any of those meltdown situations.
Nice. For people who are not familiar or did not interact with people with special needs, sometimes it's hard to see how to approach them.
Yeah.
So can you give advice for somebody who is looking like, okay, I might meet that person with special needs.
Yeah.
What do I do? What is different I need to do, if anything?
Yeah. I can tell you in my past life, I didn't understand children with Down syndrome. I was afraid of them, actually. Like I didn't know how to relate to them. I didn't know that I could relate to them. To me, they were just, these kids that just, and I'll use the word, I know it's not a good word, but they're just retarded children. Retarded is a medical term that means if you've got an IQ below 75. And I know most parents hate using that word, but it's a clinical definition of it, of where your IQ is. Those people to me were, whoa, this guy's scary. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know. And, things have changed. Definitely they've changed for me, and they're changing for society in general now, because a lot of kids are integrated into the school system. So people are exposed to them. When I was younger, we had a separate school for kids with special needs, and they went to school by themselves, and they had all kinds of disabilities, mental disabilities, physical disabilities.
Yeah.
So they were always off by themselves. Oh, there's the school, And so it's been a big learning for me. These kids, and Joey's no exception, he's not stupid. He's a loving boy. He likes to hug and kiss people. And not all kids are like that, but, it's just to really get a chance to know them and understand them.
Yeah.
Part of the problem with kids with Downs is Downs kids typically have a thick tongue, and it makes it difficult for them to talk. So they're hard to understand. Like when I have difficulty with Joey sometimes. What do you say? And he's really smart, because he'll learn how to sign something. Like he'll give you some signal. He'll come up and say, like, he wants a popsicle. He want what? He goes, a popsicle. Oh, popsicle. Like I can't understand him. So you need to learn. He's not stupid. It's just that he vocalizes well. And I learned that early, in my exposure to these kids, is that they're not stupid.
Yeah.
They just sometimes have trouble communicating, or you have trouble understanding them.
Some people might look at you and say, Alan is a hero. And
Yeah.
I actually think that way. You don't like that way, but this is my opinion as well, to take a commitment and commit your life to supporting somebody else is a great thing. You don't think you are a hero?
No, I'm in no way am I a hero or a great person. I had a coworker I worked with who had a daughter with special needs, and he didn't realize, and I don't know if we've mentioned this yet, but Joey was adopted by my wife and I when he was a baby. And I had, I don't look at it as I'm an exceptional person for doing that. I mean, I've learned so much, and to understand why, Joey was adopted, you need to understand like some of the history experiences that I've had, my wife's had, my family's had, and what led to that decision. So I have a lot of admiration and respect for the people who can take on that challenge of adopting a child with special needs. I remember watching a TV show once in the States. There was a lady that adopted something like 10 kids with special needs.
Wow.
And, I look at a person like that, I go, wow, that's a hero. That's an exceptional person. Like, they don't have to have those experiences. They just know this is the right thing to do. They have a lot of compassion. They have a lot of empathy. And I didn't have that. Earlier in my life, I didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
I developed that over time because of my experiences. So I came about, this in a different way. So that's why I don't look at myself as being some exceptional person or some hero. But you need to understand the history.
Definitely a hero to me. Let me ask you the question that people usually ask you, and then we can go to the past.
Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
That seems like such an easy question, but it's actually a tough question for me to answer. Joey's the fifth child that we've had, our final child. Two of my daughters had passed away at a young age. One was 20 months and one was 5 years old. I never know how to answer that question. So depending on who I'm talking to in the context of the discussion, I might say 3 because I have 2 other children that are still alive and living in Canada and Joey. So 3 children, 2 that are dead. But sometimes I think I don't want to just say 3 because it sort of, it says that they weren't relevant in my life. They weren't important. So sometimes I'll just say I've had 5 kids, but 2 of my children have passed away. So it seems like a stupid thing, a simple thing, but really it's a difficult question. And I've answered it both ways at times. And again, it depends on how I'm feeling and who I'm talking to. I'll say one way or the other. So
And those 2 daughters that passed away, they led you to adopt Joey.
yeah, ultimately it was those experiences with my children, especially second daughter that passed away, Ariel, that really led me and my wife both to making a decision to adopt a child with special needs, specifically with Down syndrome was what we were looking for. And that was because she had Down syndrome.
Wow. Let's talk about your first daughter.
Yeah.
Tell me about her.
Yeah. My first daughter was born. She's still alive. She's living in Canada. My second daughter was born. Her name was Alana. And so, she was this happy little baby, always saying hello and, talking to everybody. We'd go grocery shopping. And she got sick. We had just moved from Alberta to British Columbia, and I started a new job. So we were just meeting people. We didn't know a lot of people in the community. We were living in a small community. And she got sick, and we had a family doctor there. So my wife ended up taking our daughter and said, look, she's got a high fever. She's sick. And the doctor said, okay, it's maybe just a viral. Just monitor it, take some Tylenol, and sent us home. And my wife went back again. I don't know. She went probably 2 or 3 times to the doctor and said, look, the fever's persisting. And he misdiagnosed what was wrong. My daughter ended up having meningitis, bacterial meningitis. And so she was irritable. She was trouble sleeping. I'm sure it was painful for her. And, I was laying down with her one day and she fell asleep. I go, oh, finally she's asleep. That evening we had some friends come over for a dinner, and two of my coworkers, their wives were nurses, and they said, oh, can we look at your daughter? I said, yeah. So they go in and look at her, and they go, you got to take her to the hospital. Something's wrong. And what? And it turns out she was in a coma. She had gone into a coma. So we go to the hospital, local hospital, and then they airlifted her out of the local hospital into Calgary to the Children's Hospital. So there wasn't room in the plane. We had to drive all through the night through mountains. to get to the hospital. And when we got in there, the doctors informed us that our daughter was brain dead, and they were keeping her on a life support system, like beating heart and breathing for her. So it was very rapid, this from the time she fell asleep in the afternoon until we were, in the hospital. And so diagnosed with having bacterial meningitis. So the doctors say, look, she's on life support, but there's no hope for her to come out of that. And so, you have a really tough discussion with the doctors to say, you're sure there's no like you always hear of miracles of people who are in comas for months and years. And you always hope, is there hope? And the doctors, you rely on them, and maybe we shouldn't have, but we did. So my other daughter at the time, some friends brought her to the children's hospital. So that there was the three of us in the room with my daughter. Then basically you take her off life support. So that decision, was made to take her off life support. So it was very quick from the onset of her going into a coma to being passed away.
How does this decision made emotionally for you to take somebody from life support? You see this as your child, and of course you have hopes, but you need to make a choice.
Yeah, it's the toughest decision I think a parent ever has to make. And, and my wife and I have made that decision actually twice, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But so it's the toughest decision. It's very emotional. Like, it's very rapid that this happened. And, but the whole experience of that makes you just think about, like, is that it? That's the end of it? One day I've got two daughters and the next day I've got one. And it just makes you question life, the meaning of life. It questions whether there's a God. Like, I'm not a religious person. I was born and raised, as a Roman Catholic, but I didn't go to church. Although my mother thinks I did, I would go back to church and read a book. But so I'm not a very religious person. I'm a spiritual person, which is something I think I've developed over the time. But it makes you question the meaning of life. Like, why did this happen? Like, I couldn't believe that's the end of it. Like, one day I have a daughter and then I don't. That's it? Like, there's got to be more to this. So it makes you really think about that and question that. And to this day, I still have those questions. I think I'm finding my way a little bit to getting closer to the answer. But like anybody, at least for me, there's no 100% certainty that I have the answer. I've solved it. This is what life is all about. And what happens after you die and pass away.
There was time when if she would have been given antibiotics, she would be alive. But because there was some mistaken misdiagnosed by
it was a misdiagnosis by the doctor. In fact, I know other kids who have had meningitis and got treatment, and sometimes they have some residual effects. They might have some brain damage depending on what happened, but a lot of people recover from it. And now, at that time, there was no vaccine for meningitis. Now there's a childhood vaccine for meningitis. But if he had have administered antibiotics, then the outcome most likely would have been different. So, I mean, that's something, I know my wife never forgave the doctor. She still to this day, I know she doesn't forgive him. We had a meeting with the doctor after everything was done. And my question to him was, did you learn something from this? Like, to listen to the parents, like, and this particular doctor, I think I won't say he had a godlike attitude, but he was like, I know best, I'm the doctor. And I really hope that this was a humbling experience for him and he learned. And that's all I asked him, did you learn something from this? What would you do different next time?
I think I would feel so angry. I would have just rage towards the person.
I mean, this is the ultimate mistake that results in your life, right? So I don't know. I didn't feel that way. I don't feel that way today. One of the things I've learned both in my professional life and personal life is, what did you learn? Did you learn something? Even my professional life, I'm always asking, what was the learning from this? And that was no different for the doctor. Did you learn something? Would you do something different? Does it save a life next time? And there's other ways to diagnose meningitis. We reached out to a research organization in the UK called Meningitis Research, and they had developed a technique using a shot glass, because with meningitis, you get these little spots on your head. If you put a shot glass on it and push down, and I can't remember the dot, disappears or stays, is an indication of meningitis. Simple thing. But doctors in Canada didn't know that at the time. And so, this could have been, and this, he's not the first doctor to misdiagnose meningitis. I know that from listening and reading other materials. So, it's one of these things that you should get angry and stay angry the rest of your life, but that doesn't do any good. Yeah. I don't know, like, could say I forgave the doctor, but I really do hope that he learned something and became a better doctor as a result of that experience.
So let me address the question to you. What did you learn from this experience? How did your life change?
Well, one thing I learned, and learned it repeatedly since then, is that doctors are not God. If you have a doctor who thinks he's the God and knows best, run away. I never, in my wildest dreams, thought that I would outlive my children, but it's happened. And it's not what you expect. You expect your life to go, you go to school, you graduate, you get a job, you get married, blah, 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 blah. You have kids, they have kids, and then you play golf and, then you pass away in your sleep. That's kind of, the thing you envision. But I've learned that life isn't like that. Things happen, and life just doesn't follow a set pattern like that. Things happen in your life, and it's a question of how you learn from them and move forward from them.
You were talking to me about the community, how community came together, and you would see empathy in people that you never seen before.
Yeah, because we had just moved into this small little town of about 5,000 people, and the outpouring of love and support that we got, like, I actually felt guilty. I went, why are people doing? People would come to our door with, like, a bunch of food and drinks, and I didn't even know them. And I said, like, I just felt so guilty. I don't deserve this. Why are you doing this? Like, it just made me real. I never did that. Like, I've known a lot of people who may have passed away, and I don't want to go talk to them. I don't want to see them. But these people were doing that. And that's one of the benefits, I think, of small communities. Like, people band together and everybody hears the story and will come and just say, hey, sorry, here's some food. And that really amazed me, I guess. All these people I didn't even know. Some we did know, like, only like for maybe a month or so, and that's it. And yet the outpouring of love that they brought just made me realize, wow, this is something.
Yeah. But life works in interesting ways.
Yeah.
Once your daughter passed away, your wife was, at this point, she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And your son was born.
She was pregnant with our son. So 3 months after my daughter passed away, our son was born. And, again, this adds to my thinking, wow, is there a God? Like, he's pretty smart, if there's a God, because he gave me a son and not a daughter. If my son had been a daughter, I think it would have always been a comparison to my daughter that passed away. Oh, this is a replacement for her. It's not a good way to look at it, but I think that would have always been in the back of your mind, thinking, okay. So, I'm thinking, is there a God? I don't believe that anymore. There's not a God up there saying you're going to die, you're going to have a son, blah, blah, blah. It's just life. This is the way life is. So I think it was fortunate that my son was born. I think it was, a blessing in disguise. So he was our third child. So we had 2 daughters and then a son. So great. I've got a son now. And so that, I think for my wife, it was tough. She's pregnant at the time when her daughter passed away. So that's a tough experience for somebody who was pregnant and just ready to give birth. So yeah, a key learning, I guess, just that, again, life just keeps going. So then now I have 2 children again. So, yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about your third daughter.
So 2 years after my son was born, we had another child, a girl. She was born. And it was great. It was like, the fourth one. They're coming out faster now. So I remember I was in the delivery room with my wife, and the doctor's washing his hands, and he literally just turned around. My daughter came out, like, just caught it like a football. I said, wow, that was quick. And so, I went home that night. My wife stayed in the hospital with the baby. And then I got a call the next day, you got to come back to the hospital, there's something wrong. Well, okay, so I go back. And they had flown in a team. Again, we're living in the interior of BC, so they flew a team in from the Children's Hospital in Vancouver to come and take my daughter to the hospital. So we go there, and there's this young doctor. I don't know, he couldn't have been more than like 24 or something. And he's explaining to me, we think that your daughter has Down syndrome. I go, why do you think that? And if you look at kids with Down syndrome, they have like a number of characteristics. Like there's like hundreds of them, that they have. They have a thick tongue. They have, thick neck sometimes. Like lots of things you can look at the shape of their eyes. That's why a lot of the Downs kids all look the same, like very similar traits. And he explained to me, well, your daughter has this line on her hand that goes straight across. And I go, well, I got that. And he goes, and the joint on their baby finger is a bit crooked. I go, I got that. And I thought, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, She doesn't have Down syndrome. I mean, with baby, it's hard to tell. So I said, well, yeah, we think she does. We're going to take back to the Children's Hospital in Vancouver, and we'll do a test and confirm that, she got this extra chromosome that's the confirmation for Down syndrome. So they flew back to Vancouver, and the next day I flew down. And when we met there, the doctor told us, yeah, your daughter's here. We'll have the result probably in a day or so, confirming if she has Down. But in the meantime, we detected that she has a heart condition, and it's going to require surgery to fix it. So, okay, so now I know we need heart surgery, and 2 days later, they confirmed, yeah, your daughter has Down syndrome. We said, okay. So to me, this was a devastating news. Like, it was devastation. All I could think about was my future, poor me, like, oh, geez, my life just got turned upside down. Now I'm going to, the normal progression of life is not going to be there. My kids aren't going to grow up and go to school and, move out and get married. Now I'm going to have a daughter living with me for the rest of her life. And all I could think about is me, something I'm not proud of at all to think that way, but that's the way it was. So that diagnosis really shook me. So then we had to meet with the pediatric heart surgeon, of which at the time there was one in all of Vancouver. And this guy was never allowed to leave the city unless he had a replacement, which would come from Toronto or somewhere to replace him. But anyways, this guy was just phenomenal. And he said, well, you need to get some weight on your daughter. She needs to get up to like 10 pounds, like 3 or 4 kilos. And then because the surgeries, she's too small, too young. So we went home. We had to try and feed her. She was very tired because her heart wouldn't work. Like even just feeding, she would fall asleep. So it was difficult to get weight on her. We're giving her supplements. My wife's pumping her breasts and we're feeding her. And eventually got her up to about 9 pounds after about 10 months. Then said, okay, the surgeon said, okay, that's good. Bring her. We're going to do the surgery. So she went in back to the Children's Hospital, went into the hospital. I did open heart surgery. And in open heart surgery, they basically cut your chest wide open and do the surgery. So then she's put into the ICU for recovery. They put her in an induced coma, so she's not moving around and just until she heals. So every day we go to the ICU and, they got all these charts and, with pens and that, you can see the charts. And we're looking at these every day. And one day my wife and I go out for lunch, come back, and noted there's some strange anomalies on the charts and asked, what happened here? And the nurse told us, your daughter had a stroke during the recovery. And we said, wow. So they said, we're going to call in this neurologist from the general hospital to come in and look at this. And this doctor came in. This is one of these godlike doctors. I'm a god. He came in with a whole entourage of people with him, all with clipboards making notes. And he looks at the chart and he looks and he goes, yeah, your daughter's going to be a vegetable. Don't expect much out of her. And went, what? Like, wow, So again, thinking, how do I relate to this? What's the impact? So now I'm going to have a daughter as a vegetable for the rest of her life, however long that's going to be. And so after, she recovered out of the ICU, went back into the ward, and, this doctor was so wrong. Like, he was completely wrong.
Did you talk to him afterward?
No, never did see him again. I wish I had have been able to go back and show him, you were so wrong. he's got all these people following around with clipboards taking notes. So, like, I really do wish I could have gone back and told him you were wrong, showing him. But that's when, after going home with my daughter, that's when I really started to connect with her and understand her and went, wow, well, one, she's not a vegetable, which blew me away. And I said, wow, this guy was so wrong. But here's this vibrant little girl. She was a little bit shorter because of her heart condition. So she didn't, get a lot of weight, and she wasn't tall. But man, she was so loving, and she wasn't a vegetable. She was anything but that. And then, so I learned a lot and related to her. And, she was just a fun-loving, a loving little girl, liked to run around. She liked playing with some of the neighbors, and we had dogs at the time. She would always ride the dogs. Like, we had Labrador retrievers, and she would be sitting on their backs. And, so that happened like for about 2 years. And it was like a connection time, bonding time for me, if you will, to really understand and appreciate like what this meant. And during that time, I decided I need to immerse myself and understand more about this. So I joined the local organization of Special Olympics, and because I wanted to understand more about kids with special needs and even adults with special needs. So I ended up becoming the local coordinator for the area for Special Olympics. And I learned a lot. I met a lot of kids. I met a lot of parents, talked to them. And I learned so much that, these kids aren't stupid. These kids have a lot of value, more value than most people, like in some ways. And just made me realize, wow, there's more to this than meets the eye.
Yeah.
So, wow. But then, after 2 years after recovering from her heart, then we started noticing she had these little dots on her skin again called petechia, which is where you bleed into the skin. And so back we go to the Children's Hospital in Vancouver, and then she was diagnosed with having cancer.
Wow.
So, then, okay, now a new challenge. And, at the time, you're always wondering, how the hell are we going to get through this, like she needed to undergo chemotherapy in Vancouver. We're living in the interior of BC. We've got 2 other children going to school. And it was like, and plus the cost of, doing this. So we ended up renting an apartment in Vancouver, which, as you know, is not cheap.
Yeah.
And so my wife and daughter stayed there. I went back to the interior. I continued to work, looked after the other 2 kids with some help from my parents and others and neighbors and stuff. So it was a tough time, tough for me, tough for my wife, tough for our kids, and especially tough for my daughter, who had to undergo chemotherapy. And so that was the start of that treatment, And so you meet with another group of doctors, oncologists, and they're explaining there's a protocol for this type of cancer in kids with Down. So we found out it's not rare. It's a somewhat common cancer for some kids with Downs, although I don't know too many who had it. But anyway, he says, here's a protocol. It's got a 90% success rate. Okay, so we try that. And that went on for about a year, and during this time, you're in the hospital, you're getting blood transfusions. They're doing spinal taps on her to get an indication of what's happening inside her spine. And the doctors would say, we're going to do a spinal tap. Do you want to come in the operating room? And they go, it's a very painful procedure. I said, no, I can't watch you putting my child in pain. My wife couldn't either. So, but they said, but we give them a drug that makes them forget it. And well, that's good for her, but not for me. So never did. I don't know, we probably did about 3 or 4 of those over the course of retreatment. And I could never go in and watch it. I just can't, I would rather be there myself, do it to me, not to her, but that's not how it works. So anyways, after a year or so, the doctors come back and say, the treatment's not working. Your daughter's not getting better. We have another protocol. It's got about a 70% chance of success. So you want to try that? They said, okay, well, let's try that. So we do that protocol. It was a little bit easier on her body. She was starting to grow some hair back. And they said, you can take your daughter home. They can administer the chemotherapy in your local hospital. So we talked to our local doctor. He said, yeah, I can do that. But you had to give injections 2 times a day. So we were going into the hospital 2 times a day, giving injections, intramuscular, in her leg, in this leg, in the arm, just keep moving around. And the doctor says, you know what? We can train you how to administer chemotherapy. It's not something they do at all very often, but given where we were located, he said, we'll train you how to do it. So we had to administer the chemotherapy. So every day we had to give these injections to my daughter, and intramuscular injections are very painful. So, one of us would hold her, like sit her on her lap and hold her and then give the injection. And what blew me away was every time we did this, she would stand up and kiss you. Well, like going, wow. Like every time, it was like just unconditional love. Anyways, that protocol wasn't working either. A year later, they said the protocol's not working. Now we have a third protocol, but the success rate is like less than 50%. And so we talked to the oncologist and said, what do you think? We don't want to try something else because, this is the case where the cure is worse than the disease. Like it's so hard on your little bodies and, like you're sick all the time. You don't feel like, and I've seen so many kids in the children's hospital that were just like, they looked like they're on their deathbed, and some of them were like, they just feel so terrible. And we said, no, we've had enough. Our daughter's had enough. We don't want to put her through any more of this. So, and the doctor said, yeah, I understand. Like, and he said, you know what the outcome's going to be then? We said, yeah, we understand that's the outcome, is that her life will come to an end. And, you always hear about people finding some special treatment somewhere in the world. And I mean, that never crossed our mind. Like at some point you just realize that enough's enough. Like her body can only take so much. Do you want to keep putting her through this? And we said, no, we're not going to do that. So we took her home. We had a couple weeks at home with some family and friends and that. And then things were starting to deteriorate, so I had to go back to Vancouver. And we were very fortunate. In Vancouver, they have this place called Canuck Place. It's a hospice for children who are basically terminal. And you go there with your whole family. You move into this house. It's sponsored by the Vancouver Canucks, which is a hockey team in the NHL. And it's this big mansion, three floors. And the family stays upstairs. The nurses station on the second floor. And then on the ground floor, they have a big living room area. Like they had all the games and TVs and, for the kids. So we moved in there with our other 2 kids and our dog. Like the whole family moves in. And you get great treatment. Like the nurses there any problems, they come up, they make sure administering morphine so there's no pain, managing that. But at this point, my daughter's kind of sleeping all the time, and we'd go for walks around the neighborhood with her. And we were there 2 weeks, and then she passed away.
There was the one story that you told me yesterday that I want to bring up, the story of the nurse taking care of her.
This just shows you how much impact my daughter had on my life, definitely, but also on other people. So in the oncology department at the Children's Hospital, there was a young nurse. I don't know, she was in her 20s, I guess. So she would help administer the blood transfusions and that. I think she really, really took a liking, loved Ariel. When we came back and went to Canuck Place, she would come and visit us in Canuck Place and spend time there with us. And we found out after she ended up quitting her job at the hospital and started working in Canuck Place. And then we found out later that she was a single mom. She ended up adopting 3 children with special needs. It just made me, wow, like I'd like to believe that was the impact that Ariel had on her life and on her adopted children's lives. Like she made a deep impression in people. I'm sure it was because of her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have, quit her job, gone to Canuck Place, because she experienced that with our family, for the brief time we were there. And then to adopt 3 children with special needs was like, wow.
Then you told me also about realization when you went to a restaurant or some cafe, and then the waiter asked you, can you tell that story?
When we were driving home after my daughter had passed away, we're driving home with my other 2 kids, and you walk in a restaurant and the waitress says, a table for how many? And we've been so used table for five, and all of a sudden, no, table for four. Like, it seems like such a stupid thing, but it resonates with you and go, all of a sudden, we're four. And like these stupid things. One day my wife and I went out for lunch when my daughter was at the hospital, and you go to sit down and the waitress comes up, gives you a minute, says, "So how are you guys today?" "Oh, we're fine." We sat down and went, "What the hell did he just say? We just come from the children's hospital. Our daughter's going through care." Like, like stupid little things just shows you kind of block out some of this stuff. But it really does, especially when you're one less person in your family.
So what was the biggest learnings from having this tragic experience happening a second time for you?
Well, it was a different experience because my first daughter, like, she passed away so quick, like it was in days. This one was a more prolonged. Like, my daughter passed away, she was 5 years old. So it's a more prolonged experience, like, and so many highs and lows, like, getting diagnosed and finding out, okay, she got this, and then having heart surgery. And that was something I forgot to mention, but, when we went to have the heart surgery, the surgeon comes in, he says, here's the risk of having this surgery, and, she may not come out of it. And I remember thinking again, I was thinking to myself, well, maybe that's a good thing, like, I still hadn't bonded with my daughter at that time. I didn't, because she was just this little girl. She was sleeping and eating for like 10 months. And I didn't know who she was going to be. I didn't know what type of person she was going to be. I didn't know, anything. And I couldn't relate. And I just remember thinking, well, maybe that's a good thing, And I feel so guilty about having that thought in my own mind, And so that a learning for me afterwards was, how selfish I was as a person. All I cared about was my future. I didn't care about her. So that was, I think, probably the biggest learning for me, was just realizing that it's not about me. One thing I did learn in the children's hospital is no matter what happens, there's always somebody who's got an even tougher life than you do. And, it gives you a little bit of solace to think that way, that, as bad as things are for me, when my daughter's in the ICU, has a stroke, there's somebody even in a worse situation. And I tell people, people feel sorry for themselves about something, go spend time in a children's hospital. And I remember seeing a lady there, her whole life, like, she spent like 15 years in the hospital. Her son was completely bedridden. They had to feed him, they had to change him, like, everything that had to be done for him. And they spent all this time in the hospital. And I went, wow. I never had to do that. But it's just, there's always somebody having something, more difficult to deal with than what you have. Is even, you may seem like you've got some tough things going on in your life, but in reality, sometimes they're just small things. And
I imagine it also impacted your other kids.
My daughter was older at the time. She was, I think, 13 at the time when my second daughter passed away. She was too young. She was only 5 when my first daughter passed away, so that's young. My son was younger too, because he was only like 7. So, but I think the death of Ariel had more impact on my daughter than we even know to this day. I think, she doesn't talk about it a lot, but I really do think she was impacted by it. She never talks about it. And my son, of course, doesn't talk about it. I mean, they know they were there. They know we all went to Canuck Place. They were there when she passed away. We had a memorial service and that too. So I think my daughter, though, was impacted by it more than we know, more than she will say.
Yeah. And there was interesting moments where your wife would see her soul leaving her body.
Yeah. So we're in Canuck Place. We're upstairs in this huge mansion, and my wife is sleeping in one room with my daughter, and I'm in this other adjoining room with my 2 other kids. And the night she passed, my wife came in, she goes, "Ariel's passed." And she says, "And I seen her leave her body." And I went, "Really?" Like, I didn't see it, but I got to believe she saw what she saw. And she said, "I seen her leave her body." And my wife was constantly telling her, "Ariel, it's okay. You can go." Like, she was, on morphine, getting, on pain. And so constantly saying, it's okay, you can go. You give them the permission to leave, which a lot of people will tell you that when people are dying or close to death, you give them the permission to go because they want to hang on. They think there's a reason to it. But anyways, yeah, I never witnessed it, but I have to believe she saw what she saw, you know.
Do you remember the exact moment where you and your wife decided to adopt a child?
I can't recall how long after Ariel passed away, but I know exactly where we were. We were driving in the car back to our house in the East Kootenays of British Columbia, and we're just coming into this little town called Wassa. And my wife she goes, I think we need to adopt the child with special needs. And I said, yeah, I think so. I said, the story's not finished. There's so much more to learn. So that was kind of the start of it. But I remember that discussion so vividly. It was a very emotional discussion. But then we started, okay, let's initiate that process. So you talk to social services in the local area and say, okay, we want to adopt a child with special needs. And that whole adoption process is very in-depth. They come and they visit your house. You have to do a write-up. Why do you want a child with special needs? They come and interview like our other children. And, what do you think about this? And, talk to them one-on-one. And so it was, it's a long process. It took us a little over a year to get that process complete. And the social worker we were dealing with in BC said, oh, there's a baby boy in Ontario who's got Down syndrome. You want to adopt them? We said, sure. A little over a year. Then they said, okay, we have a child for you to adopt, a young boy. He's a year and a half old. So my wife flew back to Toronto and she came back with our son, Joey. And he was just this little chubby little boy. And this is another experience. I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to relate to an adopted child, not your child. Like, I struggled with that too. I mean, I knew there was more to learn from the children with special needs. I just wasn't sure that I'd be able to love a child that wasn't mine. But it turned out that wasn't true. Like, Joey's no different than any of my other children. Like, I don't differentiate, or you're adopted. He doesn't even know he's adopted. I mean, we joke about it with him, but he doesn't understand the meaning of what that means to him.
It's such a beautiful journey from resisting that you have a child with special needs, and feeling sorry about yourself, to make a conscious decision to adopt a child with special needs.
Yeah, but that's the impact of my daughter. And, when my daughter, we had a memorial service for my daughter, Ariel, and I gave a eulogy, and I said, great things are going to come out of her life. Like, her 5-year life had such an impact on our community, on me. And I said, great things will come. I didn't know what, but I said, something's going to happen. So great things will come. And, I think adopting Joey was that great thing. Joey was taken away from his mother. She had mental challenges and physical challenges. She couldn't look after him. So social services took Joey away from his mother. Like, she wasn't capable of looking after him at all. So this was a great thing for him, for us. And I think, when I said great things, talk about the nurse that adopted the child, like that, I think is a great thing that came about from her experience with Ariel as well. And I think there's probably other things like that, other cases that I don't even know about, where people were impacted by her in a way that touched their heart. And that impact carries over, not just my personal life, but my professional life. I learned so much from her. Like, from a 5-year-old, I learned so much about life. I learned so much about unconditional love. I learned so much about dying. I've got a lot of empathy for people who suffer similar things or same fates, and I can really empathize with them. So yeah, it's been profound experience and made me realize there's more to life than just what you may think. Like, if you're in the matrix, this is the way life goes. It doesn't always work that way. There's more to it. And I think it enriches your life.
I think it's magical when you break the rules of life. There are rules that, okay, you have your own kids, and there's like a very little chance that Joey would have this opportunity to be with you
Yeah.
and not to be in some foster home somewhere for the
Yeah.
rest of his life.
Yeah.
So once you make that choice and you sort of hack the life
Yeah.
and you change the direction, this is where magic is happening, because you consciously
Yeah.
decided to do it from your previous experience. I think
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing.
And for me, it was to honor the memory of my children, like to say great things will come. And that's always in the back of my mind, how to honor their life. Like their life was not in vain. Their life had a meaning. Their life had a purpose to it. And I want to recognize that and continue to say, okay, that's everything I do is because of my experience with them.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the future. Right now you're 64.
66.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You look like you're 64.
Yeah.
So you're 66. Joey's 24.
Yeah.
So people with Down syndrome, they might live until 45 or more.
Yeah. The life expectancy years ago when my daughter was first born, they said life expectancy is like 45 years old. I think it's probably gone up since then, like most people's life expectancy. So, yeah.
You're divorced from your wife right now, so you're a single caretaker
Yeah.
of Joey.
Yeah.
Do you have the fear that if something happens to you, or just by the nature of time, I think you'll live until 155, but there's a chance
Yeah.
that he might outlive you? Like, what are your thoughts on?
Yeah. That's a challenge, like to think about the future. I probably should think about it more. I'm hoping that, we come to Bali. So Joey's been with me like for the last year, basically just with me as a sole person looking after him. So I always worry, what's the future going to be like if I pass away before him, which is one of the reasons that drives me to stay healthy, because I want to make sure I can look after him. I'm as healthy as I can be.
For the record, Alan is walking, 7 kilometers every single day in the morning?
Yeah.
And like every time, it's raining, not raining, he'll just be walking.
Yeah. And again, I do that with the motivation to look after him. Like that motivates me to stay healthy. So I get up early in the morning and walk before Joey's up and go do my walk, and then, go to the gym a few times a week as well. That's the uncertainty, is the future. I mean, if we were back in Canada, Joey could be put in a home, and, there's homes for kids with special needs, and that's where he would go. I don't think that's necessarily, there's some homes are better than others. I'm looking at being here in Bali, and I think there's opportunities here, but I'm not sure what they are yet. So I'm kind of waiting for the universe to answer the question, how is this going to play out? And I'm looking for people, connecting with people. Also, there's other boulets or foreigners who have children with special needs, and what are they doing? And I recently connected with a lady who has a daughter with Down syndrome from Australia, and she's looking to start some kind of hotel or hospice or something. I'm okay, I need to connect more with her and understand what she's doing. Right now, I don't have all the answers, and it's an uncertainty. I don't worry about it. I don't, it just, something will come.
If you're watching this and you have ideas, go in the comments, put some ideas, and let's share some ideas.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Hello.
Hi, Joe. What are you doing? Huh? What's happened? Nothing happened? I'm just wondering what you're doing. Well, we got to stop and buy muffins on the way home, okay? Yeah. Okay?
Yeah. And
cookies, yeah.
cookie.
Okay, you go back there. All right? We're almost finished, I think, so we can go and get muffins, okay? And cookies. And dip, yeah, okay. Yeah, and dip, okay. And pudding, get out of here. Pudding.
Yeah, a good negotiator.
Yeah, what's pudding? We don't even eat pudding. I want pudding. We don't even eat pudding.
All right. I guess a few questions before we go.
Yeah.
You see death so much around you, probably more than most people. Are you afraid to die?
No.
Why so?
It's, I've learned that's, life is tough. life is hard, so you need to have a positive attitude about it. I know I'm not going to live forever, so I don't worry about it. I don't think about it. It's just, hopefully it's not going to happen for a little while. And in an ideal world, I guess Joey would pass away before I do, so that I can continue looking after him. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't, because life doesn't work like that. I can't predict it. So I don't worry about it. And it's not something I think about all the time and worry about all the time. So.
There's a saying, if you want to make the God laugh, tell him about your plans.
Yeah.
It's like that. The final question, you watched quite a few podcasts, so you know what I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
According to Alan, how to live a happy and fulfilling life?
Well, I don't really have the answer for everyone. What's the wisdom of having a happy life? To me, happiness is a state of mind, and it's different for everybody. So all I say is know your own mind, know your own thoughts, and be satisfied with what you have, right? Don't worry about the past, or don't worry about the future. Just be in the moment and thinking and controlling your thoughts. One of the things I learned, and I said this to a lot of people over time, we don't control all the things that happen in our lives. The only thing you control is how you choose to respond to those things. The death of a child, or, somebody in a car accident, so that's all within your own mind too. I have a happy life. Joey has a happy life. And, we don't worry about a lot of things. It's not to say we don't have desires and things we want, but then it's, okay, so make sure then if you've got desires, then do everything in your power to get those and achieve those things,
Yeah.
But have an accomplishment, live a life that's got meaning and purpose. And for me, meaning and purpose is recognizing the impact my daughters had and honoring their memory. So that's my purpose, and I'm happy with that. I'm happy raising Joey. I'm okay with that. And I think, I feel good about that. So I'm content where I am in my life. I think Joey's happy, with his life. He's the happy boy. So yeah, it's
Beautiful.
yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your story.
Well, thanks for having me. I really have been waiting to tell this story, even just for my own kids, because people know snippets of the story, but they don't know all the details about my own feelings on things. And they know, okay, you had 2 daughters, they passed away, but there's so much, and there's so many more details that go into that, like things that you experience, and I'm writing them down now, and I want to do it basically to capture it for my other kids so they understand it, because I think they need to understand that journey, but they were there for part of it, not all of it, but to understand how it's impacted us. So
I'm sure this is not our last talk here.
I think we could do a podcast just on Joey by himself,
Sure.
and the challenges with him, and yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for listening and watching. And if you enjoyed it, please follow us, subscribe, like, and put some good things in the comments. Send some good love to each other, and let's spread this love. Thank you. Bye-bye.